So this afternoon, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Sarah Beth Wilson. I mean, we already know her in her involvement with Cassetta over the years. But her lecture today is on Dorothy Antoinette LaSelle, A Constant Awakening. Dorothy Antoinette, or Toni LaSelle, is recognized for her career as an artist and veteran art educator, devoting much of her life to teaching at Texas Women's University, a post she held for over 45 years. A staunch proprietor of abstraction, LaSelle's art is groundbreaking for her innovative explorations into non-objectivity in both artistic practice and philosophy. This presentation will explore the life and career of this formative artist, whose work is praised to this day as visionary and fresh, straddling historical and contemporary worlds. As to our speaker, Sarah Beth Wilson joined the Menil collection in Houston, Texas as exhibitions manager in September of 2021 and was promoted to senior exhibitions manager in July of 23. Prior to that, she served as director of exhibitions and curatorial projects at the Art League Houston and curator of exhibitions and collections at the Art Museum of Southeast Texas in Beaumont, Texas, from October 2014 through January 2019. She received her Bachelor of Arts in both art history and museum studies from Baylor in Waco and attended Texas Christian University, Fort Worth for graduate school, where she was awarded a full fellowship, travel grants, and graduated with her Master of Arts in Art History. Wilson brings a wealth of exhibition management experience to the Menil collection, including curatorial knowledge, arts project management, budget management and development, installation, and research experience. She is a contributing author in Making the Unknown Known, Women in Early Texas Art, 1860s to 1960s, The Artistic Legacy of Buck Shewitz, also at the Texas A&M Press of 2023, Sense of Home, The Art of Richard Stout in 2017, and Wild, The Art of Jules Buck Jones, published in 2019. She also wrote the appendix, including artist biographies for Dr. Katie Robinson Edwards' Mid-Century Modern Art in Texas, and she also has given numerous lectures at art galleries and institutions, including speaking to art department students at Baylor University about her career in the art world, and presentations at the Center for the Advancement and Study of Early Texas Art annual symposia. Wilson currently serves at the executive committee and board of the Houston Center for Photography and is an active member of the American Exhibition Organizers and International Exhibition Organizers. Prior, she served on the board for the Center for the Advancement and Study of Early Texas Art from 2014 to 24. And additionally, she has participated in numerous grant review panels, including the Visual Arts Grant Review Panel for the National Endowment for the Arts, as well as the statewide Arts Create Grant Visual Arts Advisory Panel for the Texas Commission on the Arts. Please join me in welcoming Sarah Beth Wilson to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue, so much. Can y'all hear me okay back there? Okay, just holler if you can't or if I walk away, so just let me know. It's an honor to be here with all of you today and also to follow all of the great presentations we've had today, including Michael Grauer. Certainly a career honor to follow him, but also one of the scariest things I think I've ever done in my life. I will not have all the theatrics. I'm still working on those parts of my presentation skills, but I will tell Michael that it was a real great thing he could join us today. We almost got away with all women presenters, but naturally we're gonna end with one. So you were just a little slip in there that we got in, but thank you so much. I also want to give my thanks to Cassetta, the staff, the board, and everyone here today, including all of the members. We've spoken a lot throughout our presentations last night and today about keeping the flame alive and supporting artists, but one thing Cassetta does really well is supports research and scholarship and curatorial work. And I've been affiliated with Cassetta off and on for about 14 years now. I kind of feel like I've grown up with this organization, and that's something that I am very indebted to. I just want to thank Cassetta for all they've done for the arts in Texas and people coming up in the field. So also, just before we get into Toni LaSelle, I wanted to piggyback on some things Sue was discussing last night in her lecture. It's really great to think about all of these people and these artists that their work continues today, and some of them are just missing family or foundations or anyone that can support them and continue their work to be seen. One thing that's interesting about Toni LaSelle, or Dorothy Antoinette LaSelle, is that during her later career, definitely in her later stages, she had constant gallery representation. She was represented by Murray Smither, Barry Whistler, and then now the LaSelle Foundation works actively with Inman Gallery in Houston. So she'll continue to see her works coming up in contemporary exhibitions, both in the private museum sphere as well as in the commercial art gallery industry. So it's an honor to be here with you today and to present the extraordinary life and legacy of Dorothy Antoinette, or Toni LaSelle, which is what I'll call her today. She was an artist, educator, and intellectual whose century-long journey spanned and shaped key moments in American modernism. Born in 1901 in Beatrice, Nebraska, and passing away in 2002 in Denton, Texas, LaSelle lived a life defined by curiosity, courage, and conviction. Working for nearly 45 years at Texas Women's University, she championed non-objective art in a region where it was far from embraced, yet she remained resolute in her vision. She brought the philosophies of the Bauhaus and the experimental energy of abstract expressionism to the heart of Texas, bridging Midwestern sensibilities, international influence, and Southern determination. Her paintings, writings, and pedagogical contributions reveal a woman who believed deeply in the power of art to awaken, challenge, and transform. Through bold uses of color, innovative forms, and interdisciplinary methods, LaSelle not only contributed to the artistic discourse of her time, she shaped it. Today, we will explore her remarkable journey, her pioneering role in Texas modernism, and the enduring relevance of her work in contemporary conversations about abstraction, gender, and the American art canon. And so just to kind of explain what we'll be looking at today, I will be kind of going a full biographical approach on Toni, but I'm going to have lots of images. They are sometimes loosely in chronological order. I mainly just wanted to show you lots of her work. There's a lot out there. Like I said, Inman Gallery is working with the LaSelle Foundation. I expect we'll be seeing more in the coming years with exhibitions and publications that they have planned. And so there's great inventory both in private collections and in museums, but then some also still available. So hopefully you can add to your walls. Dorothy Antoinette Toni LaSelle was born in 1901 in Beatrice and passed away in 2002 in Denton. She was 101 years old when she passed away. Her long life and multifaceted career offer rich insights into 20th century American art, particularly through the lens of regional modernism and the development of abstraction. Despite being based for most of her life in Denton, which was a small town in North Texas at that time, LaSelle maintained an unwavering connection to national and international artistic movements, actively participating in the evolution of modernism. Her career encapsulates key dynamics of Texas collecting practices, which often emphasize geographical or institutional affiliations and sometimes overlook innovation in favor of familiarity. As a faculty member at Texas Women's University from 1928 to 1972, LaSelle became a central figure in the development of non-objective art in Texas, even when it was met with skepticism. LaSelle's oeuvre is celebrated for its bold, formal experimentation, nuanced handling of color and line, and an innate understanding of space, establishing her as a crucial, though historically under-recognized figure in American abstraction. Her legacy is also one of bridging gender divides in art history, as she operated in male-dominated circles, yet remained fiercely committed to her identity as a woman artist, educator, and leader. To better understand her influence, we must place her within the broader context of modernism in Texas, an artistic movement that shaped and was shaped by her contributions. The Texas Modernist period, which we've heard a lot about already this weekend, spanning roughly from around 1900 to the 1960s, encompasses a wide range of styles, including regionalism, surrealism, social realism, abstract expressionism, and even early minimalism. While some artists emerged from Texas, many, like LaSelle, were transplants who brought with them diverse artistic training and global influences. These artists often faced pushback from local art communities, critics, and audiences more attuned to realism or decorative traditions, yet they persisted in advancing a more experimental visual language. And we'll discuss more about Toni and her work in Denton, but the creative community at TWU specifically, I think, was just this perfect breeding ground for her career to flourish. I mean, it really gave her the support network in both an intellectual and familiar sense with artists and women artists that she could relate to. And so these two paintings, I mean, they were created about a decade apart, but I wanted to put them next to each other because with LaSelle, I think it's important to remember that she is working in abstraction, dominantly non-objective work, but there's still always reference to the natural world. And when you really step away and look at her pieces with that in mind, you can start to imagine her Midwestern upbringing, think of plots of land, segmented landscapes, kind of when you're in an airplane and you're looking down and how everything looks so compartmentalized. And I do think this is still its own sense of regionalism, non-objective regionalism in a way. Corinne Spellman's painting on the right here is definitely one of the more popular styles of the time, but you can see how the two were synergistic and would work together, and they definitely knew each other while they were at TWU. This is actually a work on paper that's in the Menil collection, and LaSelle's work with its disciplined abstraction and theoretical underpinnings not only challenged regional expectations, but expanded the canon of modern American art to include the South and the Southwest. The core of Texas modernism was a desire to break with academic conventions and connect more deeply to universal principles of form, light, color, and movement. Those are 4 principles to really keep in mind as you look at Toni's work today. LaSelle's contributions are especially vital considering that she operated from a state where non-objective art was not widely practiced or understood in her early years. Her growing recognition through major exhibitions and scholarly interests underscores a vital reassessment of her position as both a regional and national figure. To understand how she became such an influential figure, it is essential to trace her early life and formative experiences in Nebraska. And I do want to say the color on the projector is a bit off. These are vibrant, very rich colors, saturated but still lively. So just imagine them a little bit more intense and punched up a bit than what you're seeing here. Raised in the Midwestern town of Beatrice, LaSelle's early environment shaped her visual sensibilities through its expansive skies, river systems, and spatial openness. In 1994, Dawn Letson, along with Carrie Kessler of Texas Women's University, conducted an oral history interview with the artist in which she talked about her early childhood and upbringing. She described Beatrice as a small city with a meandering river known as the Big Blue River that flowed down through the state. LaSelle states that this river formed a lot of my attitudes, which shaped the kind of forces that are in my paintings and drawings. Her upbringing on LaSelle Street, which was named after her family, instilled in her a strong sense of place and familial legacy. She was surrounded by local artists, musicians, and writers, and her early art studies were actually with her aunt, Ellen LaSelle Salisbury. So she started taking watercolor lessons and learning about compositional elements at a very young age from her aunt. And I think it was pivotal that this showed her the practice of women working as artists, and that was kind of instilled in her family life. The local education system in Beatrice, where she grew up, had a huge emphasis on arts instruction, and so she was able to take art classes up into her high school years. And it was during her high school years that she attended a lecture by Laredo Taft, and she talks about this lecture as being really formative for her, and that it was just an emotional awakening, a feeling of artistic ambition ignited by perceived limitation. And this idea of perceived limitation, I think, is this kind of tension that we see throughout LaSelle's career. She left behind so many journals and writings that are fascinating to read, and she's constantly questioning herself about her path, what she's meant to do. She had so many different interests as well as visual arts, and so there's even moments, which I'll talk about in a little bit, where she was debating should she switch gears and be an art historian and not really focus on the visual arts. So she was constantly feeling this kind of push and pull within her career. And hearing Laredo Taft really made her think about that. She stated, I mean, he was a top-notch sculptor at that time in the academic style, but the irony of that is that by the time I got through the university 5 years later and was in graduate school in Chicago and visited his studio, I had already made a contact through a teacher in Nebraska who had introduced us to the post-impressionists, Cézanne, Gauguin, Van Gogh, and the Cubists. She had seen the Armory show in New York. By the time I got to Chicago 5 years after his talk, I was already past the academic Bauhaus style and mad about post-impressionism. So going back to Katie's talk from earlier today, I think it's really important to remember these European influences that are constantly impacting our artists. And sometimes I feel like saying there's influences can kind of be pejorative, but in this case, I really think we need to think of all of our artists as in just this community and network. They were working together. Of course they were looking at each other. It's not a bad thing to have been inspired by someone or to pick up with some of their ideals in their work. This early tension between aspiration and circumstance was a recurring theme in LaSelle's artistic journey. Inspired yet determined to grow beyond these early boundaries, LaSelle pursued higher education that would ultimately define her artistic philosophy. So she went to Nebraska Wesleyan University after high school, where she graduated in 1923. And at that time, she was already kind of bulking up her interdisciplinary studies, and she was studying English, science, psychology, philosophy. So she was not just pigeonholing herself into the art world. She was really wanting to expand her horizons. The impact of her teacher, who had attended the Armory show, cannot be overstated. This direct exposure to revolutionary modern art shifted her trajectory from traditional to avant-garde. Her time at the University of Chicago expanded her access to one of the most intellectually rigorous and artistically rich environments in the country. Her master's thesis that she wrote when she went to the University of Chicago following Nebraska, she wrote her master's thesis on a comparative study on New Guinea masks and their influence on Cubist art. This was a radical for its time and placed her within early dialogues of global art histories and cultural influence. And so I think you can see on the left, you're seeing a self-portrait, on the right, just a portrait study, but you can already see her breaking apart of these forms, looking for this more Cubist influence and breaking apart our picture plane. Through daily visits to the Art Institute of Chicago and exposure to writings by Nietzsche, Anderson, and Dreiser, she developed a critical framework that merged philosophy and visual practice. Her intellectual depth became a hallmark of her teaching and writing and laid the foundation for her championing of Bauhaus and Cubist theories in Texas. Armed with this rigorous academic foundation, LaSelle began to find her artistic voice in the early stages of her professional career. So following graduation from the University of Chicago in 1926, she took a position at the State College of Indiana later that year. While teaching there, LaSelle produced a body of work that was called her Mood Studies. These were really some of her first big public successes, and she was showing them at a local gallery, and an anonymous buyer came in and bought quite a few of them. But with the payment back to Toni, he demanded, or she demanded, that this was for a travel fund. She could only use the money for that. Well, she got $300 total from the sales and was able to fund her trips to Europe. Which I would love to go back to that time. We're way beyond that, I believe. One night in this hotel would not go far on that budget. But in France, when she goes to Europe, she traced the legacy of Cézanne and the Cubists, while in Italy, she became mesmerized by the mathematical balance and grandeur of Renaissance architecture. And I show these two paintings that are from around this same period because I think you can see this French post-impressionist influence, particularly in these. I should have put an image in here, but Cézanne has studies from early in his period where he's looking at rooftops situated in a landscape that you can definitely see kind of a resemblance. Also, how do I do the little, oh, okay. This really nice thick blue line that she's outlining the buildings here makes me think of Matisse and these post-impressionist artists and how they're directing your eye through the composition, much like Sue was discussing last night, and really giving us focal points throughout. Go ahead here. These travels marked the start of her blending formal abstraction with emotional resonance, a unique hallmark in her later work. That European journey led her to a seemingly unexpected place, Denton, Texas, where she would leave an indelible mark on generations of students and colleagues. And so this is a watercolor that you see here that she made actually in Italy. And I love this composition. I love the just very this is atypical, just putting this plant right here in the foreground. It's as much about the plant as it is about the composition behind it. And I think that's something, as we turn and look at LaSelle's more non-objective pieces that she's known for, think about what she does with foreground and background, positive and negative. She's constantly flipping that. I would argue that her background, her negative space, are sometimes the more dominant parts of her composition, and she's going in and adding in other elements. And I think you'll see that as we move ahead. In 1928, LaSelle accepted a temporary summer teaching position at the College of Industrial Arts in Denton, Texas, an opportunity presented through the University of Chicago's Placement Bureau. This was supposed to be a temporary assignment, but it evolved into a lifelong commitment to Texas Women's University. At the time, it had been renamed from Texas State College for Women, where she taught for over 4 decades until her retirement in '72. LaSelle was initially uncertain about relocating to what she perceived as a small, isolated town, but she was soon struck by the intellectual atmosphere fostered by faculty like Julia Hill Atwill and Mary Marshall. These women were deeply informed in contemporary art practices, and their presence signaled a progressive and dynamic academic community. She built lasting relationships with fellow artists and educators like Corinne Spellman and Thetis Lemon, forming a collective of women who supported each other in advancing creative experimentation. And this is just a photo of LaSelle during her times at TWU working on a portrait bust. And this is one of her later at campus. LaSelle's role quickly expanded beyond the classroom as she was tasked with helping to build the art history curriculum from the ground up, a testament to her scholarly credibility and leadership. In her journal, she talks about the internal struggle she felt at this proposed transition in her career path. Although LaSelle was humbled as well as honored at the proposition, she had a feeling of uncertainty and nervousness at such a monumental undertaking, although her experiences had certainly prepared her for it. Later, after accepting the position and completing numerous benchmarks for proper accreditation and credentials for the new department, LaSelle debated whether she might be more inclined to become an art historian and drop her visual arts career. Her influence helped shape a holistic and interdisciplinary art education program that championed creativity, theory, and process in equal measure. Among some of her most iconic contributions during her TWU tenure was her leadership in the creation of the Little Chapel in the Woods. And the Little Chapel in the Woods is still there. If you go to their website, unfortunately now you mainly see wedding photos. They are beautiful, but you can go visit it and see everything inside just as it was. The Little Chapel in the Woods was constructed between 1938 and 39. Was a visionary collaboration between faculty, students, and regional craftsmen at TWU. The chapel was designed by O'Neill Ford, one of the most celebrated modernist architects in the Southwest, alongside Archbishop Swank and Preston Guerin. The chapel was conceived as a space not only for reflection, but as a living project in community arts education. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt personally dedicated the chapel on November 1st, 1939, bringing national attention to what was then a pioneering model of female-driven design and artistic collaboration. So here you have some photos, just giving you the exterior and interior of the chapel. And then on the left, this was the committee, basically, of faculty advisors that oversaw the chapel. So Toni's to the bottom left down here, and then you can see, but we have Edith Bresack, Corinne Spellman, I think, is in there too. There's quite a few other artists. And then these are some of these students that were assisting. I mean, and I'll talk about this more in a second, but they really did design and build everything from the ground up. And they even worked with local stonemason in the community and everything to come in and build the chapel. So it really was almost this like beautiful, very early grassroots kind of arts movement. And it really was something that we had not seen quite yet before in Texas. So I just love that photo. And that's Toni right there standing with the 2 students. LaSelle served as a faculty advisor for the project, and she was charged with conceptualizing and overseeing the creation of all of the interior artistic components. She led a team of over 300 students in designing and crafting intricate stained glass windows, brass light fixtures, wooden pews with carved embellishments and mosaic details. Graduate student Beatrice Pasco emerged as the lead designer of the stained glass windows, assisted by Sammy Tate under LaSelle's mentorship. Together, they collaborated with the Fry Company of St. Louis, renowned for their ecclesiastical stained glass, and traveled there to consult with artisans on techniques and execution. The project exemplified the educational philosophy LaSelle championed, one that blurred the line between craft and fine art, theory and practice. The chapel embodied Bauhaus principles with its unity of form and function, and encouraged female students to embrace roles traditionally reserved for male artists and designers. The iconography of the windows, centered on woman as a ministering angel, captured themes of service, care, and strength, aligning perfectly with TWU's mission. So here you have Toni assisting a student in carving, and you can see more of the stained glass and details in the chapel. During the project, LaSelle took a brief yet impactful trip to France around 1938 to 39 to re-engage with the architectural heritage of European cathedrals and stained glass. Her visit occurred on the eve of World War II, and she witnessed firsthand the cultural panic as museums and cathedrals prepared for impending destruction. Sculptures were sandbagged and stained glass windows were removed for protection. This experience gave LaSelle a renewed sense of urgency and responsibility in preserving and transmitting artistic heritage. On her return, she spoke to her students about the emotional weight of transitioning from war-torn Europe to a classroom in Texas, an experience that profoundly shaped her teaching and reinforced her belief in art as a form of cultural resilience. Today, the Little Chapel in the Woods remains an enduring monument on TWU's campus. It's a physical testament to collaborative learning and LaSelle's vision for holistic, hands-on education that merges design with meaning. And so on the left, you can see this is actually a sketch, one of the sketches for one of the stained glass windows, and then here they are again with more light fixtures. LaSelle's dedication to Bauhaus ideals did not stop with the chapel. Her partnership with one of Bauhaus's most important figures helped bring modernist theory into the heart of Texas. In the early 1940s, LaSelle was instrumental in bringing Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, a foundational figure of the Bauhaus movement, which Katie talked quite a bit about this morning. There you are, Katie. She brought him to TWU as a visiting lecturer and workshop leader. Moholy-Nagy, who had immigrated to the United States from Germany following the rise of fascism, founded the new Bauhaus in Chicago, later known as the Institute of Design. His teaching emphasized the integration of technology and materials with aesthetic education, which closely aligned with LaSelle's own philosophies. At TWU, Moholy-Nagy conducted groundbreaking workshops in metalworking, jewelry, photography, industrial design, and sculptural construction, many of which LaSelle helped coordinate and even co-taught. And this is a photo of Toni and Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, and as you can see, she is quite tall. These workshops that they would co-teach together introduced her students to advanced theories of design and hands-on construction, fostering a Bauhaus spirit in Texas that was unusual for the time and region. LaSelle herself attended Moholy-Nagy's summer sessions in Chicago in the early 40s, studying under him, Georgi Krebs, and Robert Bruce Teague. And I think that's a really important thing to point out, that this was not a passive relationship. LaSelle was also deeply committed to continue her own education. She was not just bringing Moholy-Nagy in to teach the students. She also left and wanted to study under him and learn more from him. So that just shows the spirit of education that runs so strong through her entire core. And this is an early work by Toni from that period that I think especially, how do I go back? If you look at this work by Moholy-Nagy, you can see some of the similarities in line and shape and form what they're doing. There's actually a series of watercolors from this period that you can kind of directly see that influence. These experiences not only deepened her theoretical grounding, but also confirmed her dedication to the Bauhaus ideal of uniting art, design, and functionality for social betterment. Through these connections, TWU became a rare Southern outpost of Bauhaus philosophy, rooted in LaSelle's passion for process, materials, and teaching as a form of artistic practice. Another major influence in LaSelle's life and work was Hans Hofmann, whose teachings on space and color theory complemented and amplified her own abstract vision. In 1944, LaSelle began attending summer classes at Hoffman School in Provincetown, Massachusetts, a hub for modernist thought and experimental painting. And this is such a great presentation, I think, to end with today, just because we've talked so much last night and then today about modernism in Texas, and also so many other artists going out to Provincetown. So it's good to remember that a lot of these artists were traveling and just had opportunities to meet artists from other areas and other periods, constantly influence each other's work. Hoffman emphasized the dynamic relationships between line, shape, and color, what he famously termed push and pull, to create spatial tension and movement. LaSelle absorbed these lessons deeply, developing a distinctive voice that combined rigorous geometry with emotional intensity. The two developed a warm and productive friendship. They corresponded regularly, with their letters now preserved in the Archives of American Art at the Smithsonian Institution. In 1947, LaSelle curated and facilitated Hoffman's first exhibition in Texas, hosted at the Dallas Museum of Fine Arts and later at TWU under the title Hans Hoffman Space Paintings. This exhibition was accompanied by lectures LaSelle gave to students and local audiences, further disseminating Hoffman's influence throughout the state. And what's following are a series of images that I think in particular show some of Hoffman's influence and guidance with Toni. I also love how they make me think of like this push-pull that she's doing. Also think back to like her comments about the river in Beatrice, Nebraska. You'll often see through her compositions these beautiful sinewy lines that just run through, drawing your eye through them. Here's another one from the same period, once again showing this blue Matisse-like line and elements. And gravity is a key point in many of LaSelle's works. She's not just placing a circle, squares, rectangulars onto a page. She's thinking about push and pull. She's thinking about polarities. And she's thinking about weight and how this all translates down through the composition. Oops. And so right here, I love this circle because you can start to see like it has a heaviness to it, almost like it's water and it's just gonna sink down. And she also does this with her merging of colors. So these are traits you're gonna see throughout some of the works we look at. Hoffman and LaSelle's relationship was one of mutual respect. Hoffman wrote in the foreword to her 1959 Fort Worth retrospective, "Since the earliest beginning of our artistic friendship, I admired in Dorothy LaSelle's work the high pitch of creatively transformed sensibility." So they were close friends and once again just exchanged work and letters between each other throughout their lives. Also in Provincetown, she met Myron Stout. There are some interesting letters and comments on that. They might have had a bit of a spout here and there. We don't quite know, but one of which I think she probably ended that friendship because she was concerned that he might have been stealing her ideas. But either way, influences happen, and we'll just leave that between the two of them. Here's another great piece, once again showing that just kind of push and pull gravitational weight that you see in her compositions. LaSelle's paintings from the 1940s through the 1970s exhibit a clear evolution from post-Cubist experimentation to a more confident lyrical abstraction. Her 1947 work composition, Still Life, in the Dallas Museum of Art's collection, uses tonal shapes in a quasi-grid formation to create harmony and tension, an example of her mastery of form and movement. So this one I think really gets it. I mean, I know this is not representational in any way, but bear with me. She's using the same compositional elements that Sue was talking about last night. She has line, color, shapes, patterns, bouncing your eye through the composition and then piggybacking so you can follow it back up. So it's a true masterpiece, and like I said, the color's a bit off here, but a stunningly beautiful work. The Prodigal is another one. This is from 1948, showcases her use of gestural lines, bright primary colors, and overlapping shakes to evoke spatial ambiguity. And then in the 1950s, she starts to create a series of works that she referenced her Climate of the Heart series. So there's quite a few of these from this decade. And in here, I think there was a certain, like in her journal writing, she dives into this some, and her journals cover pretty much anything from her, she'll have grades and comments on students, just her diary entries, travel entries, but then also thoughts, philosophical thoughts, what's going on in time, what's going on in her art career and everything. So they were really all encompassing. And in this series, I think there's a little bit more of an emotional element that we start to see with the work. Planes are often flattened, pure geometric abstraction, but there's these triangular structures that are repeated all throughout. And sometimes you start to see that compression that happens, kind of the push and pull throughout. And I think this was a deeply personal series for her, and maybe in a sense a more spiritual, metaphysical approach. Drawings and works on paper held an equally important place in her practice, often serving not just as studies, but as finished compositions in their own right. In 1948, the Dallas Morning News quoted LaSelle as saying the following: "My drawings are space and movement compositions. They can also be called space-time drawings. The plane of the paper, the planes in the drawings, and the space in the drawings are all one thing. They cannot be separated. It takes all three together to create a plastic unit out of a flat piece of paper. They look abstract, but they are concrete. They look abstract if one tries to find a still life or a figure. They are concrete, however, expressions of forms and space unified to make new dimensions out of the plane of the charcoal paper." Her 1968 Santa Cruz sketchbook pastels demonstrate this quality, delicate yet intentional arrangements of color and form reflecting her mature command of abstraction. I have to admit, these were my gateway drug into Toni. I remember seeing images of her 1968 drawings and was just blown away. Once again, the colors are not true here. You need to go to the LaSelle Foundation website or look up images online. You can see just how beautiful and tonally rich they are. Most of them are all crépage, so like kind of a pastel-like quality. Some go back and forth between a tighter line and really clear, crisp shapes to more painterly quality. But going back to what I was saying about these like opposites and looking at foreground and background and positive versus negative, I really think, especially in these works, that the background and this negative space is really some of the most important qualities. She's thinking about that as she's placing all of her works in the composition. And I'm always just a nut for drawings, and so one of my favorite things about a lot of them is that this one does not, but most of them will still have the perforated edge along the top when they're framed. And so you just really get this immediacy and this sense that she was literally just on the beach in Provincetown. She was just closing her notebook and then went back, to class or whatever, and just this very personal touch, I think, with these works. Here we go. In later works, like Untitled, this was also Santa Cruz, LaSelle embraced fragmentation and compartmentalization, using thick white lines to separate jewel-toned color fields reminiscent of stained glass, possibly influenced by her work on the chapel decades earlier. So there is a series of work, particularly in the 70s, that have a more hard edge, almost like she's taping things off. And sometimes you'll see where she starts to let paint drip or blur those edges. So she's really expanding what the composition can do in that sense. Her refined and prolific body of work led to exhibitions across the country and a posthumous reevaluation that places her firmly within the canon of American modernists. LaSelle had her first major solo exhibition in Texas at the Dallas Museum of Fine Arts in 1948. That show was titled Dorothy LaSelle Drawings. In 1950, this piece was exhibited at the renowned Rose Freed Gallery in New York City. It was a central venue at the time for international abstraction. And the New York Times actually reviewed that show and praised her for turning purely geometrical means to discreetly poetical ends. And I love this painting, especially like the white background here. And when you look at it up close, you can actually see so much color and depth coming through. So it's not actually white. She has layered paint upon that to get that tone that she wants. In 1959, the Fort Worth Art Center held a large retrospective, Paintings by Toni LaSelle, which featured 67 works and received widespread acclaim. The exhibition's foreword was written by Hans Hofmann, and that solidified her national reputation. And here's a couple paintings that were included in that exhibition, as well as a copy of the gallery guide, the catalog with the show. And this is another one of the Climate of the Heart series, really beautiful. I think this one really captures that kind of emotive, non-objective work that I was talking about. She continued to show in notable venues across the state and nation, such as the Contemporary Arts Museum in Houston, and later in group and solo exhibitions at both Smither Gallery and Barry Whistler Gallery. And Katie showed this painting earlier. This is Puritan at the MFA. What's interesting to me, and I do not have an image of the study here, but the study is actually very tight. I mean, it has hard edges. And then in the final composition, she goes in and it has a bit more painterly approach with it. So I like to think, and it's odd to kind of see a study like that with her, that, I mean, she was creating two different compositions in a way, but they are definitely kindred spirits and were, similar in that sense. In the 21st century, Inman Gallery in Houston took the lead in reintroducing LaSelle's work to new audiences, with major solo shows in 2011, 2016, and participation in international fairs like the Frieze Masters and AADA's The Art Show in New York. This is a photo of Inman's booth from 2018 when they took LaSelle to Frieze Masters in London. Here's one of the paintings that they featured in their booth. And then here's another one. They have a wide inventory. The color's really off on this one, I apologize. But they have a wide inventory of works left from the foundation. LaSelle's works are now housed in prominent collections, including the Dallas Museum of Art, which we've seen, the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, the Menil Collection, and the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth, which is where this painting can be found. Her works can also be found in numerous public and private collections. And you're not seeing it here, but this one really just has the most beautiful jewel-like undertones throughout. It's not white, it's just a way for her to kind of bring that background forward and showing the prominence it had in her composition. Toni LaSelle's artistic journey exemplifies the synthesis of discipline and intuition, regionalism and globalism, theory and practice. She was a rare artist whose impact was felt equally in the studio and the classroom, an embodiment of modernism as a lived philosophy. Her championing of non-objective art, her role in transforming Texas Women's University, and her collaborations with figures like Moholy-Nagy and Hoffman positioned her as a foundational force in American modernism. Through that mission, she helped change not only art forms, but also institutions and lives. Today, her work continues to captivate new audiences and inspire new scholarship, serving as a bridge between historical innovation and contemporary relevance, a testament to a woman who lived, taught, and painted with visionary clarity and lasting purpose. Toni LaSelle reminds us that meaningful contributions to art and culture often unfold over time, shaped not just by talent, but by sustained inquiry, collaboration, and integrity. Her work asks us to look beyond immediate recognition and to value the quieter, enduring power of ideas carried forward in classrooms, in conversations, and in acts of making. As we revisit her legacy, we are invited to consider how place, pedagogy, and persistence can form the foundation for a deeply original and influential life in art. And one great thing that I think Toni would be very proud of, and it's just a continuation of her legacy, is that the LaSelle Foundation is now doing study grants for artists. So is it annually, Mariah? Sorry, Mariah Rockefeller is here with the LaSelle Foundation, and I need to give Mariah a huge thank you for helping so much with my slide presentation today. But there's an annual study grant that they put out, and a curator is chosen to select the recipient every year. I think that's correct. And so they're doing a lot of work to continue supporting young artists and their growth, which I think LaSelle would have been totally on board with. And I just want to end with you today looking at this photo of Toni and then also reading this quote from Art Lies 1999 in an interview that Toni had with Janet Stiles Tyson. What I was really trying to do was to awaken the consciousness in my students of the invisible forces that were helping change art forms. This is all exploration, all danger. Awakening is always, for me, in progress. Thank you very much.